This is the Meetinghouse with Dwight A. Moody. News, reviews, commentary, and conversation on religion and American life. Now, here is Dr. Moody.
And good morning, everyone, to the Meetinghouse. Yes, I am Dr. Moody. And yes, I have not cut my hair. I'm wearing it in a new style today, showing my ponytail, one of my lifelong ambitions. And the COVID gave me a good excuse to let my hair grow and join the hippie revolution, which started 50 years ago, of course, when I was 20 years old. Welcome to the Meetinghouse, our conversation on religion and American life. I'm coming to you today from our studio in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Beautiful part of the country. It's rainy today, as it has been every morning. With me, my co-host today, Tom Krattenmaker, longtime friend of mine, columnist for the USA Today newspaper. Some of you have read his stuff. I hope all of you read it. He's in touch with what's going on. Welcome back to the Meetinghouse, Tom.
Thank you very much. How are you, Reverend Dr. Moody?
I'm doing really fine. Thank you so much for asking.
Maybe we can discuss the ponytail a little bit more after the program.
Can we make a news item out of my ponytail?
You already picked your 5, and I don't think the ponytail is quite at the level where we'd want to sub it in for one of the other 5 stories you've selected.
I'm going to have
that level. Sorry.
I'm going to have to do something much more radical than a little ponytail, 2-inch ponytail.
Oh no!
Right?
I shudder to think.
And so we welcome everybody, those who are listening by radio or watching on YouTube or Facebook through the St. Stephen's Baptist Church Live Network. Their pastor, Kevin Cosby, is going to be my guest today. And I think I'll bring him on right now. Kevin, welcome to the Meetinghouse.
Well, thank you so much, Ken. I'm honored to be with you.
Again, yes, both of you have been with me and been friends of mine. I'm going to pull Kevin in. I'm going to read these news stories, Kevin, and the 3 of us are going to talk about them. 5 stories this week. Of course, the big news begins tomorrow, doesn't it? In Louisville, Kentucky, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too. But here we go. We're going to start today from Nashville, Tennessee. 3 weeks in a row now, I have reported on this. Southern Baptist leaders finally voted to give an investigative committee access to the documents they need. The issue is sexual abuse in the convention and how the Southern Baptist leaders executive committee have handled the charges. The vote by the executive committee, a group of 87 people representing the wide spectrum of Southern Baptist. This was the 3rd time the committee has voted. The first 2 times failing to give the investigative team full access to the records they need. It's called waiving executive privilege. Since the vote last week, some members have resigned off of the committee. Some voting people have abstained. Shows you how contentious the matter is among Southern Baptist leaders. The investigative committee and an outside research firm must make a report on this investigation before the annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention in June. Kevin and Tom, you all know that sexual abuse in all levels of our society, sport, church, in the workplace, in the home, has been an issue, and powerfully so. It came to the fore 3 years ago with the hashtag #MeToo movement. That's when it really got hold of Southern Baptist. And I don't know whether you all have been following this among Southern Baptists or not.
Do you want to go first, Reverend Cosby?
What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I have been aware that this has been an issue. I know that several years ago, some of the prominent leaders and theologians, of course, within Southern Baptist ranks were either complicit through actual personal violations are complicit through the cover-up.
Yes.
And I think it reflects Southern Baptist patriarchal structure,
White patriarchal structure.
white patriarchal structure that minimizes justice claims for women. So whenever you have a culture like this, where you have the quote unquote complementary view of creation, in which women are viewed as subordinate to men,
Yes. Yeah.
then of course the result will be that their concerns will be subordinated to male concerns as well.
You remember back in 18, Beth Moore, the popular Bible teacher from Houston, Texas, went public with her history on this and called upon Southern Baptist leaders at that time down in Texas to take this seriously and to address it. They refused to do so, and she cut her ties with Southern Baptist Convention. She was easily the most popular and influential woman in the Southern Baptist Convention. I don't know, Tom, whether you wrote about all of that in your stuff.
Well, I have written about this sexual abuse crisis as pertains to the Catholic Church and also other institutions in society. And the Me Too movement and the problems that it has addressed really do touch pretty much all sectors of society. So you said it was the third vote, huh?
Yes,
Well,
the third.
they got it right the third time, thank goodness. I'm a big believer in transparency. I believe that truth eventually must come out, will come out. You cannot suppress it, maybe for a while, but the stuff you do to suppress it is very damaging. Let the truth come out. I don't care whether it's a religious institution or a political actor or education, but situations like this sometimes are seen as a dilemma. Do you choose transparency and confession, or do you choose to circle the wagons and protect your institutions? But I reject that framing, Dwight, because I think doing the right thing is ultimately the right thing for your institution, the institution that you're trying to protect.
Yes,
especially my view of Christian institutions.
Well, we've seen this with the Catholic Church, and my next story here is about this. But just this past week, Catholics in France released the information of their research into how many hundreds of children over there have been abused over the last 50 years. But from Cincinnati, Ohio, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese there announced plans to consolidate 208 parishes and group them into 60 families of parishes. This is the culmination of a long process launched more than a year ago in response to declining attendance and an insufficient number of priests. Sacramental practice, by which they mean baptisms, confirmations, weddings, are down 23% over the last 10 years. And 20% of their priests are expected to retire in the next 5 years. That's in Cincinnati. The plan, called Beacons of Light, giving a positive slant on some bad news, I think, allows for public comment during October, with the final version of the consolidation plan due to be released in November. It'll take effect next summer. The Archdiocese is the 44th largest Catholic diocese in the country, more than 440,000 Catholics, the 5th largest school enrollment with 40,000 students. There are currently 208 parishes, 112 Catholic primary and secondary schools in the diocese. So when you talk to Catholic leaders, as I did this week with a prominent Catholic professor in Cincinnati, they trace much of this decline to the sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church.
Well, that's been huge.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are tempted to say, well, why dwell on things that happened 40 or 50 years ago? But I think we must. I think that those messes, and I'll use the word sin in this context, that sin remains festering until you've cleaned up the mess, dealt with it, atoned, repented, and set in place procedures to make sure they don't happen again. And the Catholic Church, sadly, has been slow to do that.
They've been very, very slow to do it. And of course, we're dealing with lots of things like that, dealing with Native Americans and all the abuse of their children who were sent to Christian schools and forced to convert. And of course, this is the whole context of the slavery and reparations that we're going to talk with Dr. Cosby about. It's all connected, isn't it?
Might I add also, Dr. Moody, that I think foundational to this problem is the whole issue, the sexual ethic issue of celibacy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell a retired priest that our institution has rescinded our position on celibacy?
Yeah.
So that the new generation of priests will have marriage as an option. And I think that the decline of the priesthood to a great degree is this whole celibacy rule for priests.
It's all right there together. I had a conversation related to all of this with my own congregation down here in North Carolina last night, and how the defection from organized religion and all branches of organized religion, how the defection of the younger generation is going to push these institutions to deal with these issues in fresh ways, and perhaps even spark a renewal of the institutions as they convert, repent, change, drop some of these old things, and emphasize really what is at the core of any religion. Anyway, talking about dropping something, my next story here from Virginia Beach, Virginia, Pat Robertson, one of the most influential Christian leaders in the country, has announced his retirement as host to the 700 Club, the premier show on the Christian Broadcasting Network, which he founded in 1969. It's been the longest running TV host show in the country. He's now 91 years old. He's going to continue a limited engagement with both the network and Regent University, which he founded in 1977. During his time working at the network, Robertson earned national and international recognition as a philanthropist, educator, religious leader, businessman, author, and as a person who said some crazy things all too often. He ran for the presidential nomination for the Republican Party, we all remember, in 1988, finishing third. He's had a very interesting and influential career, although I've never been a big fan. I don't know that I have ever watched a single session of the 700 Club.
Yeah, I've not either.
No.
Well, you mentioned the crazy things that he said. Did you guys know that there's a whole Wikipedia entry called Pat Robertson Controversies?
Really?
Wow.
I checked it out, and there are 32 such controversies listed on that Wikipedia page.
Tell us a couple.
And I'm sure there were others.
Well, without even telling us what they are, I'm sure that one of them is his attributing the Haitian earthquake several years ago to the tradition of the practice of voodoo.
Yes. Yeah.
That rings a bell. Well, I don't have the list in front of me, but I have two other examples. Okay. One is from 2012. There was a horrible shooting at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin, and Robertson claimed that it was caused by atheists and others who, quote, hate God. And then coming to this year, he said that critical race theory, CRT, it's like used to criticize everything now. He said that CRT is a monstrous evil that gave people of color the, quote, whip handle over white people. And so I'm sorry, but I have a hard time not letting these controversies define who Pat Robertson is and has been. He's done a lot. He's been very successful. You have to give it up for all that he's accomplished. You know, the books, the founding of a university, the long-running TV program. I mean, it's impressive. And he's worked until he's 91. But still, as I was saying a minute ago, it's hard not to think that the harm is at least equal to, if not greater than, the good. What do you guys think?
Well, I would agree. You know, it's his religion, this white Christian evangelical religion that is pushing so many people out of the church and has come in for so much criticism, not only in the church, but out of the church. It's exactly what he represents, kind of a form of Christian craziness that has made so many young people disgusted. Even though it's generated a lot of money. It'd be interesting to know how much money he's raised and what his personal fortune is.
It would be.
Well, two things I would add to that, and that is that we always must make a distinction between Christianity and whiteianity. Secondly, as radical as this statement may appear, it still remains true. And that is, Jesus never referred to himself as a Christian. That the whole idea of quote unquote Christianity is such it's a social construction that has always been used historically to justify white domination and the subordination of people of color.
And actually the subordination of dissent.
Yes.
From even from wide stretches of the white community. I mean, this was early on one of the driving forces in the development of Christianity, and the suppression of dissent and the given priority to people of color.
And the imposition of colonialism.
Yes.
I mean, Christ has been so entangled with culture that it's almost impossible to distinguish what is Christ and what is culture.
It is.
So, Christ has been co-opted to justify everything from slavery to colonialism to militarism. And disentangling Christ from culture, I think, is critically important. And it's I think it's essential to understand, Dr. Moody, that the Bible doesn't come with footnotes, and it's not a self-interpreting book.
That's exactly right. And as a person raised, shaped, called, baptized, educated, and ordained in white American evangelical culture, it's been quite a journey for me to come to grips with all of this, to learn a very different narrative, to read the Bible in a very different way. Kevin, you've been a big, important factor in my journey. We're going to talk about that in a minute, the books that you've pushed my way. And I think many of us in the white evangelical culture are looking for practical ways to undo it and to disentangle our own religion from it as far as we can. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, but I want to tell a story now about a Christian that we all admire from Bethesda, Maryland. Francis Collins, one of the most famous and influential leaders in the country, has announced his resignation as director of the National Institutes of Health. The 71-year-old physician and geneticist has led the National Institutes under 3 presidents. Prior to that, Collins led the National Human Genome Research Institute and its international project to map the human genome, for which he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He'll probably get the Nobel Prize one day. In 2006, Collins published the book, The Language of God, A Scientist Presents Evidence for Belief, in which he describes his conversion from atheism to Christianity while a medical student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Collins has been at the forefront of the effort to develop and administer the COVID-19 vaccine. I read the book when it came out, Kevin, and of course, maybe you know this story. He was in the hospital being treated, and it was an African-American, it was a Black nurse who witnessed to him and started talking to him about her faith in Jesus that led him to conversion and baptism when he was a medical student. And of course, since then, he's been one of the most highly respected doctors, administrators, and Christians in the country. I don't know. Have you all read this book, The Language of God?
No, but I just wrote it down.
Yeah, it's a really neat book where he deals with how he grapples with this, merging his interest as a religious person and as a science person.
Well, Dwight, his work and his example have been so important. What I'm referring to specifically is the fact that he's an evangelical Christian.
Yes.
And this has been an age in which many, many, many evangelical Christians have had this idea that you have to choose between faith and science.
Yep.
Right.
And this idea that if you embrace the reality of evolution, for example, then all the doctrine and all the Bible and all the understanding of God goes out the window.
Right.
And it's so unfortunate and so wrong. You can be a Christian and still accept the validity of science.
Amen.
And that's something I've written a lot about. I believe that really strongly. And so thank goodness for his example.
Thank goodness for his example. And, it parallels the work of the Templeton Foundation up there in Philadelphia, which gives grants and hosts seminars that do the same thing. And thank God there are people like this around.
Amen. Well, there's no conflict between medicine and meditation.
Right.
Both are essential, but they deal with two different realms. Science cannot disprove religion one way or the other. Religion tells us how to go to heaven. Science tells us how the heavens go.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
They deal with two different realms, and we need to eat from the tree of knowledge, but we also need to eat from the tree of life.
That's what a great statement. And we need to encourage the best and brightest of our young people to pursue these careers as scientists and writers and as engineers. And we need to present them, Francis Collins, as a role model of the impact that Christian citizens can have in the country. Well, my last story here is one of my favorite from New York City. Jesus Christ Superstar celebrating 50 years.
Wow.
Rock opera about Jesus with music by Andrew Lloyd Webber, lyrics by Tim Rice, premiered on Broadway in New York City in October of 1971. I was a college senior. It's loosely based on the gospel accounts of the last week of Jesus' life, ends with the crucifixion. The work interprets the psychology of Jesus and other characters, especially Judas. Initially unable to get backing for a stage production, the composers released it first as a rock opera musical album, and the first live performance was in July of 1971 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 13,000 people.
Whoa.
The success of the album and the performances led to the show's Broadway success, 1971 and on. By 1980, the musical had grossed more than $237 million worldwide, running for 8 years in London between 1972 and 1980. It held the record for longest running West End musical before it was overtaken by Cats in 1989. Also music by Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Did you two see Jesus Christ Superstar?
Of course I saw it. I had the record. I listened to it all the time. I love it.
If I remember when I first saw it, when it first was produced, I believe that Judas was a black man.
I believe so.
Is that right?
Yes. So I said, no, why does Judas have to be the black man?
Yeah, I know. And of course, later they some versions of the production have been all black cast.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right about that.
Well, I feel as though my life is impoverished because I've never seen it. But of course, the songs were everywhere during my teen years. You'd have to have been living under a rock or having permanent earplugs if you weren't familiar with those songs.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great run they've had, and what an influence on the culture. And even though I haven't seen Jesus Christ Superstar, it's a reminder to me again of just the resonance and the power of the Bible to be a source of stories and inspiration and fascination, and the story of Jesus, even in a culture that is supposed to be secularizing.
Well, somebody told me recently that the evangelist of our day are the artists.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about visual arts, dramatic arts, literary arts, music, how much religious themes are infused into what we normally think of secular music and secular stories. And it's an example, Tom, of what you're saying, how pervasive the Christian story is in our culture. We're looking at Superstar. A few years before Superstar, Godspell came out.
Mm-hmm.
I was in London in January of 1972, went to see Godspell in the West End of London. And, both of these stories were edgy. They were very secular. They were challenging some traditional understandings of Mary and Jesus and Judas and the whole thing. I liked it. It had a big influence on my perceptions of things. I think we're going to play some here in just a minute. Maybe normally we play, calm traditional shaker music here in the meeting house, but I think we've got a selection from Superstar. Tom, I know you have to bow out here. Blessings on you. Thank you. Take care of business, and we'll see you the first week of November.
I look forward to it. Good being with you.
Thanks. Kevin and I will be back in just a minute with more talk about reparations and the American descendants of slavery. But here's some Superstar. Well, that was not Superstar. That was our sponsor of our news, PerfectoCoffeeInc.com out in California. Kevin, I'm going to send you some of their coffee.
Great.
A young couple that I married back when they were students at Georgetown, went out to California, started their business, have done really well. And they support us. We support them. This is Dwight Moody in the Meeting House with Dr. Reverend President Kevin Cosby, my friend from Louisville, Kentucky, president of Simmons College of Kentucky, pastor of St. Stephen Baptist Church, great advocate of racial justice in the city there. Welcome back to the Meeting House again, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Dwight.
The big news, we have gone through 5 stories. The big news is going to be tomorrow when you open up. I think this is your 3rd or 4th annual conference on the American Descendants of Slavery. Tell us about it.
Well, this is our 2nd conference.
Okay.
And the ADOS conference is a conference that is designed to engage America with the unique justice claims of the American descendants of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
In 1968, when Martin King Jr. was assassinated, there were 22 million Black Americans. If you combined all of the other ethnic groups in America, such as Latinos,
Asians,
Caribbean, combined, they equaled less than half of the African American population.
Mm-hmm.
So in 68, we had just basically two different groups, and that was black and white. So when Martin Luther King Jr. talks about in his dream, a dream where black men and white men and Jews and Gentiles would sit down at the table of brotherhood, you had basically the binary of black and white, Jew, Gentile, Protestant, and Catholic. Those were the binaries. Now we have an influx, and that was due to the 65 Immigration Act.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have an influx into our country of different ethnic groups that during the Obama administration pushed Black Americans who traced their origin back to slavery to the third largest ethnic group in the country behind Latinos.
Mm.
So we now have a new moniker for race, whereas it once was black and white. Blacks were systemically and structurally oppressed. Now you have people of color.
Mm-hmm.
The EROS movement says that we have to disaggregate ethnicity so that you don't have BIPOC, Black, Indian, people of color, that it's been disaggregated so that the unique justice claims of Blacks who can trace their origins back to slavery are addressed. Because if you disaggregate ethnic groups to see how Black people who trace their origins back to slavery are doing, the data shows that we're not doing well. In fact, we perhaps, in every measurement of importance, have experienced tremendous social and economic regression.
Right. Yes, you describe this in your book, Getting to the Promised Land.
Yes.
And I've read the book. I've reviewed the book. People can read my review at the meetinghouse.net under the review section, Getting to the Promised Land, where you deal with this. Now, I'll have to tell you, frankly, reading the book, Kevin, where you deal with this phrase, people of color, and how it has become popular in our culture, and your pushback against it in order to keep your justice claims alive. This caught me off guard. I have to say that as a white person, sensitive to these things, I've never known exactly what phrase is appropriate to use. I've used that phrase, people of color, many times myself without knowing its background and the statistics that you share. But you make a compelling case based on Ezra and Nehemiah. I bring this out in my review. I have never read such a creative interpretation of Ezra and Nehemiah. And the case, a positive case for, can I say this, ethnic purity, or at least keeping a particular ethnic group, their identity clear, which is the point you're making right here.
Yes. And when I was in seminary, my Old Testament professors condemned Nehemiah.
Yes, for this reason.
For this reason. And that's because they were looking at Ezra and Nehemiah through the lens of the majority.
Yes.
But if you look at Ezra and Nehemiah from the lens of the minority powerless group, one thing that minority and powerless groups do not want to lose is their ethnic distinctives and their sacred stories.
Yes.
That can be lost in the process of quote unquote integration. So integration can result in the disintegration and the diluting of Black power and Blacks as an ethnic group.
Yes, you talk about this in the book. We in America, all of my life, have been led to view integration as a positive thing, as inevitable, as an act of justice. But there's another side to this, and this is what you bring out in the book.
Yes, and I think that the mistake that white people made, which Dr. King sought to correct to a great degree because of the influence of Black nationalism and the Black Power movement, was that white people thought that integration meant Black people becoming Anglo-Saxons or brown-colored white people.
Right.
So many white liberals with the white savior complex attempted to save Black people from Blackness. When the goal should have been to save Black people from white supremacy and oppression.
Wow.
What Black people wanted to be integrated into was not white culture or really not white institutions. Black people wanted to be integrated into white privilege.
And that's what didn't happen.
That's what didn't happen. Black people wanted to be integrated into the policies that made white people middle class. So when Social Security was first proposed, Black people were excluded. When you think about FHA loans and the creation of the suburbs,
Blacks were excluded.
Black people were excluded.
Yeah.
When you talk about great schools, for example, in Alabama, in the 30s and 40s, $15 was appropriated for every white student. 30 cents was appropriated for every Black student. What Blacks wanted was to be integrated into the wealth. We integrated everything except the wealth. So it is what Professor Harold Cruz calls non-economic liberalism, which basically maintained hierarchical structures in which whites controlled the power, the wealth, and set the rules, in which Black people had to adjust to rules that were set by those who have the wealth and power, which is still true to this day.
It's very true. The last time we talked, Kevin, you held up this book.
Yes.
And you told me to read it.
Right.
And I did. I read it straight through, reviewed it, and people can read my review on the website, themeetinghouse.net. I had never read a book on reparations. I'd never even read an article on reparations until I picked up this book. I think 2 professors at UNC Chapel Hill, if I remember right.
Yes.
And I think, are they a husband-wife team?
Well, they're not at. They're at Duke.
They're at Duke. Okay.
At Duke University.
In Durham.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, this was a tour de force of the history of who has gotten reparations and who has not.
Yes.
And of the efforts dating all the way back to the Civil War, the efforts by some people to provide economic reparations that were always torpedoed by other white people.
Yes.
I'm telling you, it was a powerful book. This is people need to read this book.
It's outstanding.
From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century, William Darity and Kristen Mullen. I ordered it off of Amazon. It can be in your house in 2 days.
Yes.
You can read it. White people need to read this book.
Yes.
White people need to read your book.
Well, thank you.
There need to be church groups, because in your book, it's about Ezra and Nehemiah, 2 wonderful books in the Bible. The story of the walk around the walls of Jerusalem at midnight is one of the most dramatic stories in all of the Bible.
Yes.
And I like it because I've been over there so many times and have walked around the walls. Groups need to take your book, book clubs, Bible schools, Sunday schools. They need to read your book, have the Bible open right there with them, and read through. I suspected as I read through your book, you had preached this material before you put it in a book. Am I right about this?
You're totally right. Yes.
Yeah. And I could tell that you were addressing your congregation. Many other congregations need to do this, to read this book. I may suggest that my little congregation down here in North Carolina read this book and talk about it.
Well, I would love to. If you read it, I would be honored to engage.
Let's do that.
Engage in dialogue.
We will do that, and we'll get you on Zoom and dialogue with you about it, because this is what needs to happen with white people all over the country.
And the ADOS movement will be meeting at St. Stephen Church beginning tomorrow. The one of the founders of the ADOS movement, Yvette Carnell, will open us up, and we'll have plenary speakers and break into groups, and it's going to be a great conference. And people from all over the country have flown into Louisville to participate in the ADOS conference.
How much of it is going to be live streamed?
All of it.
Great.
Yes.
Right here on this channel that we're being broadcast on right now, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I may see if I can broadcast some of that, share it to my Facebook page.
Love for you to do that.
I'll try to do that. There's one other little note that I want to bring up. I know you have been the national leader in the response to the killing of Breonna Taylor. And you know that I have a home and have lived for 4 or 5 years down in Brunswick, Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered.
Yes.
And the trial of those 3 men is starting this month, Kevin. And in all of the strange and unexpected twist, my wife has been called to jury duty.
Wow.
In the murder case of Ahmaud Arbery.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how many people they call in, 100 or more, I'm sure. Whether they'll pick her for the jury, I don't know. She's kind of reluctant to do it, I think.
Amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. And I have followed that whole thing down there, the Ahmaud Arbery murder, the Breonna Taylor murder, the George Floyd murder. That was the trilogy of events.
Yes, it was.
Triggered so much
right
of the attention and activity and response. And we've talked about them over and over again here on the show. And from all different angles. I remember one of my guests the week after George Floyd was murdered was a minister, had been long scheduled, was a minister of worship at the largest Lutheran church in Minneapolis. And what we talked about on the program that day was the change in their worship service that they had to make literally overnight to turn their service into a service of lament. I'll never forget that conversation with him. Anyway, Kevin, it's been great to talk with you. God bless you.
I appreciate the Meetinghouse. Your editorials are phenomenal. You're such a humble, down-to-earth person that I forget sometimes that you're a scholar. And your insights and your scholarships comes through in all of the editorials and reviews that you have written. I mean, they are absolutely amazing. And if anyone wants to get a very clear-eyed, critical review on some of the important issues of our day, I cannot recommend enough the analysis of Dr. Moody and the Meetinghouse. Every preacher who is really concerned about progressive Christianity needs to know about the Meetinghouse and what you're doing. So thank you so very much for putting some important arrows in my quiver.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And I'll say this again publicly. I've said it to you privately. I've said it many, many times to people. What a difference you've made in my life. The books you've put in my hand. I have right back here, my whole shelf right here, including the very first one that I read under your tutelage, The Half Has Never Been Told.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what a difference this made in my whole imagination, my whole mental world. And I have you to thank for this. You've been my teacher. And if I write anything that is true and honest and of good report, I give you a lot of the credit in it. God bless you in your work.
Bless you, brother.
And I appreciate you coming on today. We'll do this again. Blessings on your conference.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to be watching it, and I'm going to figure out how I can stream it through my Facebook Live as well. God bless you.
Bless you, brother. Thank you. Be blessed.
Okay, I'll be back in just a minute with another commentary from the Meetinghouse entitled, I Want to Write a Book. Thank you, Kevin, for that endorsement of the Meetinghouse, and thank all of you who are watching today or listening and who will listen later on. I'll have to say, I meant to say this to Dr. Cosby. I sent my copy of his book to a young minister in North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, whose name also happens to be Kevin, and urged him to listen to our conversation today. He wrote me back and said, I'll log on later in the day and watch the broadcast and listen to your conversation. You can do that on Facebook Live, of course, and also all of our programs, the audio track of them become podcast, and you can go to the meetinghouse.net/podcast and listen anytime you want. There are literally hundreds of book reviews, commentaries, and podcasts at the meetinghouse.net. My column this week is entitled, I Want to Write a Book. In truth, as those who know me will say, I'm always wanting to write a book. I've written several books, some of which were actually published, some not. I've got a manuscript right now ready to send to the publisher. It's entitled The Great Amen, Launching and Leading the Academy of Preachers, about my 10 years from 2008 to 2018, engaged with the Lilly Endowment and with the Academy of Preachers. But I'll have to say today that the book I really want to write would carry a title something like this, The Church We Need. And by we, I mean those of us in the United States reeling from decades of declining numbers and wrestling with how to relate the gospel message and our work as gospel workers to the centers of cultural power. What has been dominant throughout my half century of gospel work is dissolving before our eyes. Martha Simmons posted this week this statement, quote, the great discussion of the next 10 years will be, what shall we do with the empty church buildings? a member of my small church here in North Carolina, is an architect. He said to me recently, quote, "Most of what we do these days is advise megachurches on how to offload property and downsize their operations," end quote. Sociologist Robert P. Jones, who was my guest in the Meetinghouse just a year ago, wrote a book called The End of White Christian America. The statistics that come at us with unrelenting force confirm that the entire Christian establishment in the United States is in peril. And I'm thinking all the time, what next? For most of my life, white evangelical Christianity has been ascendant in these United States. Part of its allure was connected to Billy Graham and his incredible popularity, and part was derived from a network of parachurch organizations like Campus Crusade for Christ, American Bible Society, and Focus on the Family. Cultural issues like integration, abortion, and homosexuality rocked American society and disturbed the American church. White evangelical Christianity stood firm against all three of these for as long as they could. And then convictions about these matters among the white people went underground until the election of Barack Obama and the rise of Donald Trump, in which they roared back with a vengeance. In a move that shocked everyone, white evangelical Christianity claimed Donald Trump as their own and hoped he would lead them back to the future, by which they meant white, straight, and in control of women in all aspects of their lives. Throughout these years, white evangelical Christianity claimed a quarter of the American population. Roman Catholics claimed another quarter. And they were also up against women in the pulpit, gays in the church, and abortion in the clinics. They were, to be fair, more open to integration, racial integration in their schools and churches, especially as the number of internationals serving as priests in America expanded dramatically, and as the number of Hispanics moved up from Central and South America, many of them already Roman Catholic. Mainline Protestant Christians, once the dominant version of our faith in the United States, has been in numerical decline for more than 50 years. Only in the last 2 years have these folks given any relief. The data now points to a slight uptick in their numbers. And does that mean that out and out liberalism is the future of Christianity in America? I don't know. In and around these three major expressions of Christianity, and what I mean is white evangelical, Roman Catholic, and mainline Protestantism, are smaller, denser, and in some cases more compelling versions of our ancient modern faith. The question is not so much where is authentic Christian living being embodied, explained, and exported into the community today, but more fundamentally, in what does authentic Christian faith and practice consist? What does it mean to be a Christian? What part of our tradition, broadly imagined, needs to survive in order for the Christian community to flourish? Or an even more important question, what elements of believing, behaving, and belonging in the name and spirit of Jesus are necessary for the human community to survive and thrive, to flourish? The question assumes, of course, that our religion or some religion will be of great significance in the movement of human culture toward a healthy and humane future. Many people question this assumption with good reason. Others are convinced that the future is full of disaster and void of hope. I think life, truth, justice, peace, beauty flow naturally and essentially from the faith and practice that is centered around Jesus. So I push back against all the negativity. I believe in the future of the human community, and I believe Christian community has much to contribute, much that it must contribute. That's what I want to write about. As soon as I figure out what I want to say. And that's going to involve reading, observing, conversing, especially here in the meeting house, thinking, preaching, especially in my Providence Baptist Church in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and testing my ideas with friends like my Trinity group and other friends and foes alike. I'd be glad to hear from you. What artists, books, congregations, what events or ideas or institutions, what leaders or movements do we all need to pay attention to? Tell me what you think. You could go to the website and email me through the response form on the website at themeetinghouse.net. You may be watching on Facebook right now, and you could just post a comment in the Facebook page. You can call me, text me, or just come over here to the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina and sit down and talk to me. It's a beautiful time of year. I'm Dwight Moody in the Meeting House. I'll be back in just a minute. Yes, you're in the Meeting House, coming to you from the mountains of North Carolina today, Hendersonville, North Carolina to be exact. I'm Dwight A. Moody to be exact, your host in the Meeting House. Thank you for listening and watching today. Thank you for your interest. Thanks for my two guests today, Tom Krattenmaker up in New Haven, Connecticut, Kevin Cosby, Louisville, Kentucky. Modern technology is great connecting us like this. I hope you stay connected with us. Go to themeetinghouse.net. You can subscribe to the newsletter that Dr. Cosby was writing about and talking about. I'd be glad to add you to the subscription list. It's free, and you can read all the commentaries and book reviews, including my review of his book. Listen to all the podcasts, including today. You can join the Circle of 70. This is our fundraising effort. Pat Robertson had his 700 club. I'm trying to just get to 70. We're about halfway there. You could become a donor if you believe in what we're doing, if you believe in the conversations that we've had today are important to civil discourse in America. We need your help. And we thank you for your help. You can visit the support page at themeetinghouse.net. That'll give you information, an address where you can send your contribution, all of it, of course, tax deductible. We are a nonprofit chartered in the state of Kentucky, recognized by the IRS. So thank you for listening today, coming to you over Rejoice 975 in the Golden Isles of Georgia, 97.5 FM, 94.7 FM in Glenn County, Georgia. That's Brunswick. And coming out of Louisville, Kentucky on the SSC Live TV network through Facebook Live on the meetinghouse.net and on my personal Facebook page. You may be watching it there. Thanks to my engineer, Everett Armstrong, down in the studio in Brunswick, Georgia. And to Alex Mattingly, who lives and works out of Lexington, but works for the St. Stephen Church in Louisville. You can follow me on Twitter. There's plenty of room on my follower list, Dwight A. Moody. Until we meet again next Thursday, 1 o'clock, be safe, get a vaccine, wear a mask, keep your distance, have consideration for other people, do some justice, love mercy, order some coffee from perfectocoffeeinc.com, send us a donation. Pray for the soul of America. I'm in the Meeting House. Dwight Moody, signing off. Have a great day.
You have been in the Meetinghouse with host Dwight A. Moody. Thank you for watching or listening today. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net for more news, reviews, commentaries, and conversation on religion and American life.